Welcome to Holistic Health Heroes, here to help you become your own health advocate and introduce you to some heroes in the holistic health arena. Let's get started. Hi, Allison.
Hi, Carrie. How are you?
Good to see you.
It's great to see you.
For the listening audience, I want to read a little bit about your background. There's a lot more to say, but let me just introduce Allison Waguespack.
You're worried about my last name, so you're going right there. I get it.
Okay, Allison spent a decade working in a creative and business capacity at advertising agencies in New York City and San Francisco with clients like American Express, Citibank, and Netflix, to name a few. Very cool. She pursued teacher training with renowned Ashtanga yoga teacher, Master Larry Schultz. Very interesting because he was the personal instructor for the Grateful Dead. Love to know more about that. She's certified in mindfulness meditation, has studied anatomy studies for yoga teachers, has been involved in very impressive nonprofit work, I might say.
Thank you.
And is founder of Clarity Mindset, Clarity with a K, where she teaches mindfulness workshops, of course, yoga, and hosts retreats for corporations, groups, and individuals. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to talk to you today because, like we said, this episode is going to go live early 2025, new year, new mindset, perfect opportunity for us to set ourselves up for success with a clarity mindset, with something that's going to, help us be successful because, we're kind of living in some tumultuous times right now and things are hard for people. They're hard for people health-wise and financially. So I just want to start off by asking you a broad question of how do we set ourselves up for success with our mindset in a new year?
Well, just a small question, right?
Yeah, no pressure.
Easy peasy. Well, honestly, like anything else that you want to do in your life, it's practice.
Yeah.
So I'd love to say there's some quick fix, magic pill, whatever, that you could just change your mindset, but that's not how it works. But the good news is that there's opportunities to practice all the time. And that's actually what mindfulness is. It's being able to notice when there's a message that you want to receive or a shift you want to make, and then being able to make it. Because without noticing, there's no chance.
So true. Awareness.
Exactly.
So key.
So we started, the genesis for this podcast was because we had a walk a couple weeks ago and you were saying, I was really thinking about the topic of suffering. Mm-hmm. And I said to you, that's really funny because my last retreat was all centered around minimizing suffering. Mm. And that's one of the big ways that we can change our mindset from a place of extra suffering, because there's going to be suffering.
Yeah. You can't escape it.
That's actually one of the most eye-opening things for people when we start working together, either when I work with people one-on-one or on my retreats. And I basically say, look, we're supposed to have pain sometimes. We're supposed to have bad times sometimes. Things are supposed to hurt in the body. We're supposed to get our heart broken. All those things are supposed to happen.
Yeah, you can't avoid it.
Exactly.
Right.
So if you look at the Buddhist tradition, it tells us that you're supposed to have 10,000 joys and 10,000 sorrows in your life if you executed perfectly. Mm. So Kiri, you went through your life, you didn't make one mistake, 10,000 joys, 10,000 sorrows.
Wow.
So there's kind of a freedom in that, because the first step is like, okay, you're having a bad day, something hurts, or you're just going through a rough time in your life in general. It's like, all right, this is part of my process. Like I'm not being punished for something. This is part of my process. So what do I do? How do I learn from it? So that's kind of the first understanding that I offer people, which is this idea that we're supposed to have pain sometimes. We're supposed to,
and then we have ups and downs. It's part of life. It's part of the human experience. I like how you said it's a practice, and that means, to have anything, I don't want to say like go your way, but you have to practice to get that result, whatever it is. So being that it's a practice to have a good mindset, what are some of the practices that you advise people to do on a daily basis, I guess?
Well, so first of all, it's identifying the ways that we individually cause ourselves extra suffering. So one of the ways that we do, a lot of the extra suffering that we experience as human beings is around the idea of uncertainty. So we do not like to not know what's coming next.
I can relate to that.
Yes, I think most of us can. And so the tighter we hold on to the expectation that we should know what's coming next, the more suffering we cause ourselves.
Yeah. Do you think that goes along too with like perfectionism? Because if you want a perfect outcome, you're going to be really concerned about controlling all the elements of things, right?
And you can't really. So there's kind of two pieces to that. There's surrendering a little bit of expectation of an outcome. And then there's knowing that change is inevitable. So there's the uncertainty around not wanting things to change. And then there's the uncertainty around not knowing what the outcome of change is going to be. So those two pieces make up a huge portion of our suffering. So I'll give you an example. Like, let's say you stub your toe, right? And you have the initial pain of like, ouch, that was unexpected and that hurts. And am I going to, okay. Like,
did I break it? What happened to my nail?
But see, so the first part is just literally the sensation of your toe and shooting all the way, your brain sending the signal down to your toe and like, ouch, that hurts. And then you start going down the rabbit hole. I'm not gonna be able to wear those shoes I wanted to wear. I'm so stupid. How did I do that to all of that extra thought? That's the suffering part.
There you go.
The pain is the pain.
Yeah.
So the flip side, the opportunity is like, okay, I stubbed my toe. Moving on. You know what I mean? Because we ruminate over things that we can't change. You can't change what just happened.
Right.
And now you're projecting out all the potential possible problems that you caused for yourself that you can't change. There's nothing you can do about it. If you broke your toe and you can't fit into those shoes, there's really nothing you can do about it.
Right. You just have to accept, have that acceptance.
Like, okay, that's not meant to, I'm not meant to wear those, and then move on. So that's just obviously a tiny, tiny little example, but it's being able to catch yourself in that moment between the pain and the suffering.
And the ruminating.
Exactly.
It makes me think about that phrase you often hear in a yoga class where the instructor will say, let go, let go. And I always think to maybe like the newer people in yoga, they're probably saying, what am I letting go of?
That's fair enough.
It's the suffering, right? Like,
yes, it's letting go of what you're holding on to. So yes, you could translate it to suffering. I mean, I try not to say that personally that much because it doesn't really mean, to your point. It's like, what am I letting go of? Am I supposed to not activate this muscle? But anyway, that's a side thing.
Yeah.
So another thing that I offer to people is something called what I call the top 10 tunes. So what we do is you take some time and you write down the top 10 things that you think about most days. So funny enough,
so it's not your DJ set list.
No, it's not your DJ set list. So we, as humans, we have about 60,000 thoughts a day, and 98% of them are the same as yesterday.
Hello, Joe Dispenza.
Yes.
Right? That's the work of Dispenza coming in. I like that. Okay.
So it's like we are creatures of habit. We very quickly create patterning in the brain, the same cycle of thought over and over again. The good news is we can change it. Again, with the noticing. So what helps us is if we take a look at that list of what I call top 10 tunes, but it doesn't have to be 10, it can be 12, it can be 8. It's like the things that you find yourself spending the most time thinking about, and usually they're negative things.
Yes.
Because we have what's called a negativity bias. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes, I am. In fact, I'm thinking about things that I'm like, what do I think about every day? What are my top 10? You know, some of it's like, I'm not there yet, or I'm, this hasn't happened yet, or, it's like that urgency, that rush, but you can't get anything like going in the right direction if you're always like panicked with urgency.
Right.
It's something I've been trying to, learn and slow down on and implement. And
where is that pressure coming from? That's the question you need to ask yourself. Is it external pressure or is it internal pressure? So there's actually you're getting to my next
good. Please take it away.
Process here.
You're making my job easy.
Is that code for I'm tugging your ear off?
No, that's good. Go for it.
So there's two types of uncertainty. So, okay, we as humans, we do not like to live in uncertainty. It makes us uncomfortable. It's the root cause of much of our suffering. I'm not going to say all of it, but much of it. If you took a look at your list of top 10 tunes, a lot of your top 10 tunes would relate to uncertainty in some way. Fear of something that might happen or might not happen in the future, or change, just the natural change that we are all experiencing as humans.
Right.
So there's really like two types of uncertainty. There's internal uncertainty and there's external uncertainty.
Internal uncertainty, I'm just going to put a pin in it for you. Internal uncertainty coming from within, external uncertainty coming from others or whatever.
Yeah, like events and actions that you can't control. Things that are outside of your control are external, and things that are coming from your own internal thought process is internal. So internal uncertainty, it often stems a lot around how we see ourselves, the identity that we're creating for ourselves. So that's where that angst could come into play for you, that idea of like, ooh, I'm not exactly where I want to be at this point in my life. I feel like I should be checking this and this and this box, and I'm not.
Right.
So that is self-created, right? Which means we have the power to shift it with that noticing. And that simple question of where is that pressure coming from? And it might be external. You know, you need to make a living. You have people that depend on. I'm not saying that they're not real issues,
right?
But it's how do I minimize the extra suffering? Maybe it's the suffering I'm putting on myself unnecessarily versus the reality of whatever I need to get done in my life. So how do we deal with the internal uncertainty? So I'll give you an example of internal uncertainty. We create really small, very tightly wound identities for ourselves a lot of the time.
So true.
So, you know, like for my personal experience, I'm a mom of 2 kids and they're getting older now, you know, and for a long time I was like the mom and the PTA and the carpooling and all that stuff. And now my daughter is a junior in college and going to graduate in a year and a half. And my son is a junior in high school and has his license and I never see him.
Wow.
So you take somebody who's wrapped a lot of their identity into being this young, involved mom, and now I'm not this young, involved mom anymore. So
you have to change your identity.
Correct.
Yeah.
You have to, it's about broadening and making it more malleable and flexible. Because what are the things about that time in my life or that being a mom that are important to me, and how much of that is still there? Like, I want to be a guide for my children. I want them to come to me when they need me. And I also want them to grow and develop into productive members of society. So instead of focusing on what I've lost, which is, okay, yes, I'm not carpooling anymore. I'm not going to gymnastics meets and swim meets. And my kids are not calling me every second of the day with this crisis and that crisis. But now I look at, you know, my daughter, she just came back from Europe. She's so much more independent. She's on her way towards that end goal, that broader goal. So shifting how I see myself helps me suffer less,
right,
when I can see it broader.
And it's making me think of a word that you often hear in the yoga world is attachment. Like if you're super attached to your identity and you're not flexible and you're not malleable with it, then it's going to break. Like something's going to break, something's going to feel really wrong, bad, whatever, you know, be triggering for you psychologically. But if you're able to implement that flexibility and shift and change, which we all have to do in life, I think it's making me think about how, you know, how sometimes you can feel like every day is the same and all of a sudden you have something that goes different in your, you know, whether it's a new chapter or a new job or a new routine or whatever. And suddenly it's like, whoa, everything's changing. But really it's always changing a little bit, right?
Yes. Yes, it is. It's always changing. And so being able to roll with the waves of change, sometimes the waves are really smooth. I mean, sometimes the ocean is almost so flat you can't see it moving at all, but you know it is. And then sometimes the waves are crazy high and crashing on the shore. And it's how do we manage whatever the waves are bringing in. And that is a back to practice, right? Because you're not going to nail it all the time.
Right. Yeah.
And it's
that's
really
impossible.
good to practice when the waves are calm. So when it's just one shift in your life and you're like, okay, I'm going to roll with this. I'm going to try to accept this change and understand this is a natural part of whatever, getting older, whatever the change is.
Right.
So instead, building these sturdier identities might be around, okay, I really enjoy nurturing things, and maybe I'm not nurturing my kids anymore, so I want to get an animal, or like figuring out what are those deeper traits about yourself, because those are things that don't change.
Those don't go away.
Yes.
If that's who you are as a person, then you want to find a different outlet.
Another way to think about this is another Buddhist concept, and it's called the basic goodness versus the good self. So your basic goodness are all the things, Kiri, about you that make you you. Your spirit, your heart, your laugh, your smile, your intelligence, the things about you that are intangible. They are inside you. They are never going to change. And then the good self is how society treats that society values. Aesthetics, maybe financial success, things like outside of us that society puts on us. So what often happens when we don't have a sturdy identity is that we've put a lot of our identity into the good self category versus the basic goodness category. So the opportunity we have is to shift back and say, okay, underneath like attractive, physically fit, whatever those things are that that one may have attached themselves to, underneath that, what are the things that really matter about you that aren't going to change? For me,
in touch with those.
Exactly. Yeah. For me, I like bringing together communities of people. I like helping people learn mindfulness. I can do that forever. Right. I could be 80 years old and do that.
True.
I could have 10 grandchildren and do that. Those are the things that allow me to build a sturdier identity. I'm just using myself as an example.
So. No, I appreciate that example. And, I like how you brought up the work of Joe Dispenza, because I think, knowing his story a little bit and how he used his mind so much to heal physically, like from a terrible back injury, I think it was, that also is connected to your health, your physical health, whether you're suffering 100%. With some chronic disease or digestive issues or aches and pains, or your mindset is going to greatly influence your healing ability. Have you had any personal experience or talked to people that have had these kinds of things? Like, how do you connect mindset with feeling or healing physically?
So I have a couple of great examples of that. One is, so I lived 2 years of my life in chronic pain. It was a series of surgery, fallout from surgery, and then scar tissue that I didn't know about that caused overstretching, because I went back to teaching, 8 yoga classes a week and putting my body through all of the normal things that you put your body through. And I then had I had a chronic issue. Let's just call it that. My sacrum basically was not functioning the way it was supposed to. So for 2 years, I was in serious pain all the time.
Wow.
And what happens when you're in pain is obviously you have the pain, but then I was going down that rabbit hole of, am I ever going to get better? Is this going to be the rest of my life? Am I ever going to be able to pick up my kids? And we start going through this terrible chain of events, which is that suffering part, and my physical therapist actually said to me at that time, and this was 12, 13 years ago. And she said, you're creating extra suffering for yourself. She's like, the pain is just the pain. Everything's temporary. She was ahead of her time for me. And then I've had many experiences since then. I healed, and it wasn't just through my mindset to heal. I needed to have some physical medical intervention, of course. But there are lots of things where that's not the case. So tennis elbow is one of those things. So a couple of years after my odyssey with my back, I got tennis elbow, common thing. And I was sitting next to at a gymnastics meet, a friend of mine who's a orthopedist, and I was like, what do I do? I've had this for 3 months, and I just keep every time I reach back, it hurts. Every time and he's like, stop thinking about it. He said, your brain patterns that pain long after the tendon is healed. He said, it's 6 months, it will go away. Whether you think about it every second or not, 6 months, it'll go away. And
wow,
he was right.
This from the orthopedist.
Exactly.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. He said, don't do anything. 6 months, it will go away. And I've had tennis elbow a couple of other times since then in my life. And I'm just like, okay, what's the date? I'm not going to think about this for 6 months.
Oh, wow.
And it goes away. It really does, because the more you think about it, the more your brain sends the patterning right to that spot, like pain. Oh. So I'm not saying you should ignore all of your pain. That's not what I'm saying. Right. I'm saying there's certain things where you can start to notice, ooh, am I participating in making this?
So you can either reinforce it, what is, or you can sort of envision what you want,
right,
and act as if, so, not saying like either that you should go out and, work your elbow hard if you actually have an injury. But yeah, I think there's something to it. But I also think for some people maybe hearing this kind of thought for the first time, that sometimes it's a really tough pill to swallow, right? That you say you're participating in your physical pain, and I empathize with that. I get it. I also get the other side, like what you're saying. So how do you kind of reconcile that for people, or is there a way that you can?
Well, what I would say to people in general is, first of all, I'm not a doctor, and if you have pain that is continuing to get worse and things and symptoms, like, you should 100% not ignore that. That's the whole other side, like listening to your body.
Sure.
Because people don't listen, and you see those stories where they don't listen. They have blood in their stool. They have this, they have that. They have stage 4 colon cancer, and they didn't pay attention to the signs. So that is by no means what I'm saying. I'm more talking about those nagging little pains that the aches and pains of everyday life. If you have an injury or serious thing, you can't walk, do not ignore that.
Right.
I just want to be clear about that.
Right.
Your mind is powerful, but you also need to see a doctor.
Yeah.
I just think in the normal daily struggle that we go through, the aches and pains, the little things that sometimes we do hyper focus on them.
Yeah.
And I know in myself, when I was going through that back issue, I would be testing it all the time. Does this hurt? Does that hurt? It just took up so much space in my brain that I could be using for other things. And that actually takes me to another point I was wanting to make, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that what happens when we get wrapped up in the suffering, these rabbit holes, is that we actually lose the power that we do have. So there's this perception that we want to try to control the external environment. We want to have control. We want to be able to predict the future. All those things. We're really bad at predicting the future, by the way. Right. And in taking up so much space and trying to do that, we actually surrender what we do have control over, which is our mental state in this moment in time, in the present day. So we're spending so much time either in the future, worrying about what might happen, what we think is going to happen, trying to predict the future, or what already happened that we're really upset about.
So that's like the anxiety, depression thing, right?
Yep.
You're too much in the future, you're anxious, and you're too much in the past, you're depressed.
That's right. And then you lose control over the actual thing that you do have the power over to change, which is the present. Mm-hmm. So that is how our suffering really works against us.
I would think that's kind of where the mindfulness practice comes in.
Correct.
Too, is, and I'm sure everyone has their own idea of what mindfulness is. There's a variety of different practices you can take on, whatever works for you. Sometimes it's walking, sometimes it's meditating, sometimes it's dance, whatever. But how do you use mindfulness, or how do you define it?
So mindfulness is anything that you put your full attention into. So thank you for asking that question, because a lot of people have no idea, and they equate mindfulness and meditation together, which is understandable. Meditation is a subset of mindfulness. So meditation is one of the ways that you can practice mindfulness. And the way I describe meditation is, when you go to the gym, you're working out your body so that your body functions better the rest of the time. Yes, you maybe get enjoyment, endorphins from going to the gym, but your real goal in going to the gym is to be healthy and strong so that you can do other things that you like doing, or look a certain way, or feel a certain way, or all the above. So meditation is the same thing for mindfulness. It's going to the gym for your mind. But you also can do lots of other things for your mind other than just going to the gym. So literally anything that you pay full attention to is mindfulness. You could wash the dishes and be doing a meditation, noticing the water rushing over the plate, noticing the sound of the sponge, the sensation of squeezing the water, and then putting that dish aside, and then taking a towel and slowly drying it, and just being fully present in that moment of washing the dish.
So it's like, be here now.
Correct.
Which is so important in today's world. I find myself being less mindful than I ever was. I'm always needing a distraction. I go to do something. What video am I going to watch while I do this thing? And it's like, no, just be here now.
A really good test, one that I try to practice, is waiting in line at the grocery store. So you notice everybody around you, you're in line, everybody's on their phone.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because you want that. To your point, it's not your fault. Don't blame yourself, because society has created a monster. Yeah. With constant exposure to signals and messages from everywhere. Now we've been trained that we're supposed to multitask. So actually, multitasking is the cause of lots of suffering. Our brains are not designed to multitask. Right. They're designed to single task.
Yeah.
And we have fallen out of that habit because we've been told that if you do 10 things at one time, you're going to be more efficient.
Right. You're so productive. You're so successful. You do 10 things at one time.
Look at how busy I am.
Yeah.
But actually what happens is the opposite. So you're doing 10 things when you should be doing one at a time. So you're only putting 1/10 of your energy into them. And when we complete a task from start to finish, we get a little endorphin hit.
Yes, and it's the
when
opposite
you are
too,
doing
right?
half of 10 things, you're not getting that hit. But what replaces that hit is we also get a little hit when we get a new piece of information. So when our brain gets addicted to that, which is why your instinct to pull out your phone whenever you have a down second is your brain being like, I need a hit, I need a hit, I need a hit.
Ooh, I like this.
So what do we do? We try, first it's noticing. And again, so I cannot highlight enough that this is practice, right? So that means you're not perfect. That means you shouldn't get mad at yourself if you forget and you do it, because we create that extra suffering for ourselves with this expectation that we have to do it all the time. But practice.
Right.
So take some time. That one time you want to reach for your phone, just don't. And go move through the discomfort of that, because you're going to feel uncomfortable.
Right.
You're going to have this wave of discomfort, but it's really short. And then it moves through. And then you're like, I'm on the other side of that discomfort. Okay. Why did I want to look at my phone so badly? But without knowing it, we're like robots. We just take it out. Look at it. We're not even conscious of it. And we're just like endorphin hit, endorphin hit, endorphin hit. Okay. And then we keep going.
I love that you brought up that yes, we know in the social media world that is a dopamine hit, and we're dopamine depleted because of it. I love, though, that you brought up the idea that completing a task brings a dopamine hit.
It does.
And maybe if we could just shift our mindful, ways of being, should be more mindful that I'm going to get my hit by completing this task, and then I'll feel really good. I mean, I feel like if you had to put point system on it, you'd be okay. It's a 1 dopamine hit of 1 if you're scrolling, or if you see another video, if you go to your phone, if you do all these things that distract you. But wouldn't it be like a dopamine hit times 10 if you completed the task?
Yep. And notice your mind want to pull you away so many times. And we are all dealing with this. I know I'm a mindfulness teacher, but I am still dealing with it just like everybody else. Nobody's immune from what's happening in our culture right now.
Right.
Where you can be listening to a podcast while you're going for a run, while you're talking on the phone. It used to just be one thing at a time.
Yeah.
So now we're flooded with messages and we get addicted to that. So breaking that addiction is practice. It takes time.
To relate this to sort of success too, whether it's success in your professional life, your personal life, your relationships with new people, friends, whoever, that the more calm you are, let's just say, have you ever met someone, you go and you meet someone new and they just have this sort of neutral way of being, and it just kind of makes you feel at ease, and it's like, wow, what are they doing that I'm like, I'm all like, yeah,
what
yeah,
are they
yeah,
drinking?
yeah, and it's just like, it's very powerful though. And or if someone says, I really appreciate you, like, how often does that happen, right? Like that someone said that to me recently, and it was like, wow, okay, I appreciate you too. And that's, I think, part of being mindful, is to be able to be quiet in our thoughts, be slower, be intentional, and it can contribute to our health.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, how you are physically and mentally are inextricably linked with each other. So we know that, right? I mean, when you're feeling down and then you get sick, or I mean, we are so intertwined. I'm not
Yes.
saying again that your mind can cure you of all kinds of physical things, but it's how much energy you focus on it.
It can certainly contribute, it can certainly contribute on the down spiral, or contribute to you on the up spiral.
Correct.
Yeah, very connected. Something else I was going to talk to you about, Allison, was, I know that you are a mindfulness coach, right? I used to put it that way. And you're also a yoga instructor. And I know when I taught yoga for a hot minute, when I did, just because, I got certified, so I did it a little bit. And I would run into people, as I'm sure you do, that say, well, I can't do yoga, I'm not flexible. And I would always say, that has nothing to do with it, really. But people, of course, like the Western idea of yoga is just the postures. There's a whole lot more to it than that. But, when people say that to you, and then how do you respond with this whole idea of you got to be flexible?
Oh, people say that all the time. I'm like, well, hey, your goal is to work from where you are. So if you're not flexible, even better. You should be coming to yoga, because then you can create flexibility. Yeah. I mean, yoga is the combination of strength and flexibility in the body, and in my opinion, in the mind as well. That's the yoga tradition. So what I love about teaching yoga is that I'm also teaching mindfulness every single time I stand up in front of a class. I always have a mindful message for the week. It's usually something that happened in my life or someone else's life that I know of, or something I read in the news, but like some tangible piece of information that you can take with you off the mat, because I know that mindfulness is for everybody. It's not just about for yoga, for yogis.
Yeah.
I know that it's for everyone.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do yoga poses to appreciate the value of mindfulness. So
I like that you bring up that phrase, from on the mat to off the mat, because that's the whole idea, right? When you have a practice, whether it's yoga or meditation or mindfulness or whatever it is that you're doing on a daily basis, or with great frequency, then the idea is that you would transfer that skill, that time, that resiliency, whatever you're building there, to the rest of your life. But I know I've also been guilty of like going to yoga every week, let's say for a good period of time, and then getting in the car and having a bit of road rage. So like, is there a way around that? I guess it always goes back to practice.
Yeah, and it's just giving yourself permission to not be perfect too. I mean, it is what it is. Like things happen. If after yoga, you're not going to be floating on a cloud for the rest of the day. It's how do I take that time? And really, yoga is a moving meditation. I mean, that's what it is. So for me, it's one of the most powerful ways that I connect to myself is taking yoga classes and teaching yoga, but it's not for everybody. And when you come off the yoga mat, so I always, I send out a newsletter every Monday, and it's with my message from the previous week. And I often get emails back from my students who either were in class or weren't, like, oh, I've really been thinking about what you said, or this really helped me, or this is an interesting perspective. And it's just showing them how to come up with their own lessons from their lives, because we are always on the precipice of the next lesson. And I think I mentioned to you, I'm working on a book right now, and that's really the idea of it. We're always on the precipice of our next lesson. So how do we see it when it's coming? And it's not that hard once you understand a little bit of what I'm talking about here.
And the more mindful you are, right, the more you practice that kind of mindful be here now thing, whatever it is, then the more you can have that self-awareness to maybe have a little more intuition. We never talked about intuition, but that was kind of coming up for me when I was thinking about our conversation. Is like, oh, I wonder if Allison talks a lot about that. Does she think that, you can build your intuition? I'm curious, what are your thoughts around intuition?
Ooh. I sort of think about it as energy. It is intuition. It's picking up on people's energy and responding to energy. And I can't tell you how many times I will think about somebody and they will call me. I don't, and I'm not saying I have any kind of special powers or anything, but I really do think the more energetically connected you are, the more that energy goes out into the world. Last week, I don't know if you saw my newsletter this morning. You probably didn't.
Yes,
but
I
anyway,
did.
I was going to tell that story briefly because that's the same thing. So I was, this is a week and a half ago, and I was just on the tennis court in my neighborhood and playing with a few ladies. And a friend of mine who's my neighbor who I haven't seen in a while came onto the next court with another person. They were having a lesson, and I just looked at her, and she looked normal, like the same way. She's very put together, beautiful lady. But I just like, oh, Jerry, hey. And I was like, I'm going to give you a hug. And I just ran over and I gave her a hug. And then I went back to my lesson, and her went to her lesson. And the next night we happened to run into each other at another event. And she literally pulled me aside and she's like, I have to tell you something. And I said, okay. She said, you gave me a hug yesterday, and I needed a hug so badly, and you felt it, and you came over and gave me a hug. And I am so grateful. And I was shocked because we really do, the more sensitive we become, the more we are picking. I mean, I wasn't consciously aware of, oh, she needs a hug right now.
You just felt like
something just, that energetic pull. And I do believe in that. I really do. Maybe that makes me sound a little foo-foo, but
that's cool. I like it. I like a little woo-woo. Okay. That's all right with me. No, I think that's really great. And I love that example. I'm sure we've heard before where you're thinking about someone and they call or
you see them.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had that happen 10 times in the last 6 months.
Wow.
Where someone either called or showed up where I was. One time I literally had left a message I called the person, left a message, pulled into a parking lot, and they were there. Just happened to be like we had appointments at the same time. Weird, very, very weird, but in a cool way.
Yeah, in a cool way. And it goes back to that practice because, okay, the phrase like tapped in or tuned, in tune or those kind of things start to come to mind. We talk about this. So then the question is, well, how do I get tapped in? How do I get in tune? What do you think?
Well, I think it starts with being able to catch yourself in these cycles of suffering. So being able to not waste. We have only so much space up there, and if we want to be more in touch and tapped in energetically to what's happening in the world, we have to shut down our own story. So we create these internal plot lines, and a lot of the time they're like horror movies that we're watching and telling ourselves over and over again. And a lot of times they're not even true, but we believe ourselves. We're very, very convincing. We know exactly how to convince ourselves of things, and we buy it hook, line, and sinker. So how do we rewrite this movie that we're watching and maybe create a little more space so that we can receive actual external stimuli instead of this whole universe that we have going on in the mind? It's the same idea. The top 10 tunes, the 60,000 thoughts, like it's just different ways to think about the same thing because different ways resonate for different people.
Yeah.
How do I shut that
down? Yeah, because if you're always distracted by everything and you've got the video going and your phone going and your TV's on and you're looking at this and you're listening to that, I mean, how can you listen to your inner voice or whatever you want to call it, your intuition, your inner voice?
Yep.
You can't listen to that if you're getting bombarded by other messages. I noticed, when I didn't really put together until I was reading your bio about your ad executive background. And I thought, oh, this is why I like her. I mean, there's other reasons too, but that's it's kind of a similar environment to my background in marketing. And so since you've been out of that for a little while, I'm imagining, do you see any parallels to what you're doing now? Or like, how do the two worlds connect? Because people out there listening might be in this situation where they're so busy with their job, they're overloaded with their schedule, they're managing this and that, they're just bombarded and they think, yeah, okay, sure. Did you have mindfulness back then or what do you think?
Well, it's kind of a funny story, actually. So I started working in New York City, and I worked in New York advertising for 4 years. And then my husband and I moved to San Francisco. And at that time, my mom and I went away somewhere for a weekend, like a mom-daughter weekend. And I took my first yoga class, and I walked out of that class and I was like, I hate yoga. This is terrible.
Oh, wow.
And then I went back to San Francisco, and a year went by, and every single human being on the planet in San Francisco does yoga. So I gave it another shot, and I started taking Bikram classes, which they don't even call it Bikram anymore, but
right.
That's another podcast. But hot yoga. And from there, I was still working in my ad job in San Francisco, but I was taking yoga classes too. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe at some point I'll become a yoga teacher. But one of the things I loved about advertising is that you are really trying to find the insight into what motivates people to do, what are you selling?
Action,
like one
right?
of my clients I worked on was People magazine, and they had extraordinary people doing ordinary things and ordinary people doing extraordinary things. That was like their message. That's what they sold to people. And they called, it's different now because people don't read magazines anymore. But back in the day, People magazine, they called it the People Zone. So the people would get their People magazine and literally read it cover to cover as soon as they got it every single week. And it was a phenomenon.
Wow.
I'm trying to remember, was it week or month? Now I'm aging myself. I can't remember. I think it was every week. I think they sent out People magazine every week. So there's this consumer insight that you're looking for to target who exactly those people are. And I think that is connected to understanding how we each function, like our own consumer insight about ourselves.
Right. And the story, there's a story there that people get really excited about. They can attach themselves to a story, whether it's in a magazine or whatever, that story that's running in your own head. But then, you have the ability to write your own and change it. And I know, like you said earlier, you're writing a book and you're working on a Substack too. So maybe you want to share a little bit about what's new or where people can find you.
Okay. Well, hopefully, I'm sure we'll put the links in, but yes, I do have a Substack under my name, and I have been posting monthly articles that talk about just specific experiences that I've had that I think are relevant to other people and strategies. And that comes from building a following for the book that I am working on as well, which is basically an expanded version of the Substack.
Yeah.
So it's showing how we each can learn the lessons in our own lives. So it's funny and poignant and sad, and a quick read. It's not dense. It's not going to be, it's not for people that are advanced reading, advanced Buddhism books. It's really for me, you, everyone to just sit down and read and be like, I can learn these lessons too. I can pay attention and notice things happening. So
kind of inspire that mindfulness practice in people.
Correct.
I would think. And speaking of practicing, I know you also do retreats.
I do.
Yeah, and you'd gone to Portugal and probably a lot more than I know of, but I remember hearing about that and thinking, wow, that looks beautiful. And anything upcoming for 2025?
Yes, actually. So I have led 8 or 9 retreats so far: Belize, Mexico, Costa Rica, Portugal, the Florida Keys. And so I have another retreat coming up in the Florida Keys. So it's a short one. It's good. It's Saturday to Tuesday in Marathon Key, which is the key just north of Key West. And it's going to be great.
Yeah.
It's yoga classes, but also mindfulness workshops. I do 4 small mindfulness workshops, and then lots of downtime, beach time, water time.
Fun time. What do you say when you hear, what do people say when they finish a retreat with you? Like, what's some of the greatest feedback that you've gotten?
I've gotten really amazing feedback. I've had a lot of people come with me multiple times. They just, authenticity is kind of my thing. So what I love to hear is just people say, you're just you, like you're the real deal. And we just enjoyed being able to have that concentrated time with you. And we learned so much. And the experience of traveling together and being away can be really transformative for people. I mean, I've had some amazing feedback, people saying that it changed their life. So, I mean, obviously,
you feel like that's an overstatement.
I know,
actually, it's true.
I mean, it's amazing. People coming at a critical juncture, a time when they really needed to forgive themselves for something. I had one student come and, we'd known each other a long time and I didn't know what she was carrying around, and it came out in retreat, and I'm like, you need to forgive yourself. Like, you've been holding on to this for 7 years and it's ripping you up inside. And she really was, sometimes you just need someone else to tell you, you need to start going through that process of forgiving yourself. Cause that's another way that we cause ourselves a lot of extra suffering, is we're afraid if we don't continue to punish ourselves that we're not going to learn from our mistakes, and that we're going to repeat the patterns.
Yes, and that's a good point.
That's unfortunate because it's really not true. We have to forgive ourselves if we want to be able to forgive other people, and we have to forgive other people if we want to be happy.
Yeah. If we want happiness.
If you hold on to everybody's, things they did to you and everything you did to them or yourself, you're living in that really ugly, scary movie.
Mistakes happen. It's part of life.
Yeah.
And there you go. Got to let go. Now it makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Got to let go of that suffering. Let's see. What else did I want to ask you, Allison? I think we covered a lot of good ground. There was one quote that I found that I just was going to share with you and see if that brought up any thoughts for you. And it is Carol Welch. I don't know if you know who that is, but I just did a quick search and I was looking for some inspiration. But anyway, she says, life is movement. The more life there is, the more flexibility there is. The more fluid you are, the more alive you are.
Love it.
Relates to yoga.
Yeah, it totally does. Yeah. But it's also just that fluidity and flexibility is not just about your physical body. It's about how flexible you are in the mind. So, one of the last things I would say with regard to suffering is that we have the amount of attachment that we have to the outcome directly correlates to how resilient we are and how flexible we are. So there's something called, and I'm like blanking on the name, so just hold on a second. Oh yeah, thank you. You know when you have a brain freeze for a second? I haven't yet, but I just did. Cognitive closure. So
cognitive closure?
Cognitive closure.
Okay.
So people that are really very strongly attached to cognitive closure, which means knowing what the outcome or thinking that they know what the outcome is going to be, they are less resilient, less, you could say, happy, less flexible human beings. But the good news is there are those people. Some people are born glass half full. Some people are born glass half empty. I'm not saying there's not a genetic component. There is, but it is a mindset. So you can shift it. Even if you're a glass half empty person by nature, you can still shift and soften your relationship with cognitive closure and allow yourself to be a little bit freer with what may or may not happen. And the reason, one of the things to think about with that is because that seems scary, right? Like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. What does that mean? But we are really bad at predicting the future. And we're actually also really bad at predicting what we think we want. So you might be like, I want this new job so badly. This is all I can think about. And then you get the job and what you didn't realize was, oh my God, now I have a longer commute. Now I'm not around for my kids as much, or now, this or that other thing, or I have to buy a whole new wardrobe and I didn't think about. We're not really good at thinking about the actual fallout of the things that we think we want. Like, how many times has something not happened the way you wanted it to and you're like, oh, thank God. This worked out the way it was supposed to.
It's like, I was so attached. This has to happen. And I'm going for that goal. It's got to happen. Let me get it. Let me get it. Let me get it. And then it doesn't happen. And you're like, actually, that was a really good thing.
I dodged a bullet. Right?
Yeah.
So that's how we can become a little bit less attached to cognitive closure and understand that we actually really don't even know. If it doesn't happen, there's probably a decent chance that we're going to be happier that it doesn't happen.
Yeah. Acceptance, just be accepting. Sometimes it's hard. You thought you wanted something, or maybe you really did and it didn't come through, but then you just accept it, and you never know what's around the corner. Could be better than you ever imagined.
Yeah, totally. I mean, one of my good friends' son, he wanted to go to a specific college. Both of his parents went to this college, and he didn't get accepted, and he went to a different college. And then that first year at that second college, he's like, I'm going to transfer. I want to transfer. He applied to transfer. He's doing really well at the other school. Of course, the first school accepts him. And then he's like, you know what? I'm happy. I'm not going to change. And it's like, it was meant to be.
Right.
But sometimes we need a little bit more. I mean, I'm proud of him for making that decision. I think he just wanted to prove to himself he could do it. But we're really not that great at predicting. So when we get so attached to what we think an outcome should be, then we're causing ourselves suffering along the way. And it may not even be what we want it to be in the end. So learning lesson of don't try to be psychic unless you have the gift.
Right,
exactly. Because there are those people, but I am not one of them.
Well, of course, like you said, we will include the links that we mentioned in the show notes. But is there anything else that you'd like to mention to the beautiful people before we close?
No, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. This has been so fun. This is, full disclosure, my first podcast.
Woohoo!
I've done lots of speaking in front of groups in corporate environment and in retreat, and obviously my classes, but this is a new experience for me. So
I'm so glad.
I'm
so glad that you were able to do it with me. It was a new in-studio experience for me too. So I'm super excited to be moving ahead in 2025 in this direction. And I thank you so much for being here, Allison.
Well, thank you too.
And for sharing your knowledge. We will, of course, include the links in the description. And for everyone else listening, remember, stay happy so you can stay healthy. And I'll see you on the next one. Psst, can you do me a favor? Text the link to this episode to a friend who you know needs to hear this. By doing so, you are helping me with my mission to open minds to all the holistic health solutions that are available to us all. We hope you'll support our small business and shop ngvitamins.com for all your supplement needs. Oh, and don't forget to follow, hit the bell on your platform of choice so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed this show, please consider sharing your review on iTunes. Until next time,